Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hit and Hustle from IRSportsDaily.com. I'm your host, Greg Flamong, and with me, as always, is Jamie Uyama, Mr. Jamie University. It is Thursday, December 12th. It's my youngest daughter's birthday today, Jamie. She is 6 years old. It's
Happy
her
birthday.
birthday. Yes, we had donuts this morning. She was overjoyed. And the other two kids were upset because she was getting all the attention. And you hate to see that. But it is what it is. So happy birthday to her. And we've got a mailbag show today, Jamie. We are going to go deep. We've got a ton of questions. People are interested in Notre Dame football, Jamie, at this point. It's shocking as it may seem. People are interested in the Notre Dame football content. So the IR Sports Daily subscribers have given us a ton of questions, a ton of good questions. It's going to be a great show. It's going to be a long show. Buckle up, everybody. We're going to be in for a long one. And if you do so, thank you for tuning in. If you like what you hear today, please hit the like button. Please hit subscribe. Please hit the notification bell. So whatever it is, we are going live. Links to the podcast are in the description below. And as always, the show is brought to you by ESQ Clothing. Ge Wang has the sale, the Christmas Day sale, or the Christmas season sale, holiday season sale presses on. 25% off all online items using code ISD on esqclothing.com. You've seen ESQ and all your favorite Notre Dame players of coaches, right? Player walks, weddings, whatever it may be. They've got ESQ clothing on sport coats, shirts, bomber jackets, tuxedos, anything you might need for a holiday gift for whoever it might be, the man in your life. So check out esqclothing.com. Use ISD code ISD for 25% off. Let's see. CFB Hurt says, lucky there are so few questions in the mailbag. Should be a quick show. All right. Rajon's got some questions about Indiana and that sort of thing. But we're going to get into that because a bunch of those questions are related to that. So let's just get to the questions, Jamie. You sound good?
Yep.
Let's get to them. All right. First question from Wisco Domer. By the way, if you wanna submit a question, you want to be able to submit to the thing, subscribe, irsportsdaily.com. Check it out. Wisco Domer, does anyone expect KVA to be available second round if Notre Dame is fortunate enough to get there? So I went back this week. I went back and looked at when he actually got hurt against Army. Have you seen the play?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't see the
So basically he gets kind of, I don't want to say he gets rolled up on. He's making a tackle on the right side, and Osbury's coming from the other side, and Osbury kind of slips, and he runs into KVA. To me, looks like a little MCL sprain. It's a knee sprain. I think it's an MCL sprain. Did a little research. If it's a grade 2, we're talking 4 to 6 weeks, and that kind of fits the timeline for what they're talking about. 4 weeks will have been the 21st. So that's the earliest part. It doesn't sound like he's ready. There's a chance that he's back for Georgia should they make that game. There's an opportunity. It depends. Like, is he practicing? Like, where is he actually at? I think after that, he would be okay. If that is in fact the injury, I don't know that for a fact. I would not expect him to play in the second round. That's just where I'm at. It doesn't sound like it, but where do you come out on that?
Yeah, I think from what I've heard is that it's probably unlikely he'll be back for that game. Sometimes, guys make progress and big jumps when you don't expect it. I do believe it was a knee sprain as well. So
Yeah.
I think unless you kind of hear, about him practicing, like he just started to kind of like ease his way back in next week, then no way for Georgia. So I mean, I think it's a way better chance that it would be like the third round if they get that far. Then
yeah, but we're just kind of speculating. But when they're so quick to be like he's out, right? And it's like we're still. And when he said it, they were like 2 weeks away. We're still right. So they had time to see if like, oh, he's kind of close. We'll see. But he was like, no, he's out. So, that's just my read on it. It's just like it's not going to be there for KVA, and that's fine, right? They've got other players that can step up in his absence there. Excuse me, Scott from CLT. Notre Dame is down 1 or 2 scores during one of the playoff games. There are key moments, perhaps game determining, where Notre Dame needs chunk plays when the defense knows Notre Dame needs chunk plays. Does Riley Leonard and our Notre Dame's wide receivers have it in them to be successful completing longer passes when the D is expecting it? We have no film of this season to prove Notre Dame can do it. If Notre Dame gets to the championship game and expect to win it, then Notre Dame might experience the above scenario once or twice during the playoffs, my 2 cents. So basically, what kind of faith do you have where it's like you got to have a 2-minute drill and it's kind of a must? You got to move the field throwing the ball, right? You're not going to be able to run it at some point. Do you have faith Notre Dame's going to be able to get the job done?
I mean, I think it's a complete unknown, right? I think anyone who says they have faith or says they don't have faith is based on nothing because you just didn't see it.
Yeah.
Didn't see that scenario. And I also think too, like the scenario that he's painting as terms of like, well, you need these big chunk plays in a short amount of time. Like that's almost every defense is going to fail. Our offense is going to fail in those situations where it's like, hey, we need like 40 yards in 2 plays or something like that. Like you're going to fail. Like you're set up to not do good. Like you need to get something fluky to happen in those situations. So that isn't, I think, really like a 2-minute drill type of deal or like, 1:30 on the clock with 1 timeout and you got to get down there, try to score a touchdown, whatever. Like that's totally different because I think one of the things too, if you look at like, say where like the clock was in the NIU game when they had to kind of whatever, they didn't have a lot of clock there. They didn't have a ton of time. So I don't really like count that as one of those kind of situations. And I also think too, because Leonard obviously wasn't really running that game, his legs are going to be a big part of that are really when it comes down to a 2-minute drill, right? Like you think about like the most famous 2-minute drill ever is probably the John Elway, the drive, right? Like 98 yards or whatever. Well, his legs were a huge part of that, right? So that's going to be something, that could be an impact there, but I think we just really don't know. I mean, I wouldn't say that you feel good about it because it's like there's so much pressure on in those situations and you just don't know. But I think it was kind of similar a little bit to like Ian Book kind of had those things where it's like, man, he had never done that. And then all of a sudden, like, I think Virginia Tech was the one where it was like, whoa, he did this for the first time. And it was like after the whole game where they had dropped 8 and he couldn't solve it. And then he did solve it. Right. So, so you just don't know until it happens. But that is, right at the top of the list of like biggest, up there at the top of the list of biggest questions going into.
Yeah. And like, it's certainly not their strength, right? So Notre Dame's playing away from their strength. I think like in the scenario we're talking about here, like maybe you're down like 14 with like 5 minutes left. You need to score kind of quickly. You can't have a methodical drive. It's like you do have a little less faith because if you're down 14 with 5 minutes left, you've kind of been struggling at some like throughout the game, right? That's why you're down 14. You're not moving the ball that great unless the defense is just getting shredded and it's like I don't know, 42-28, right? Like in that case, maybe, but I don't really expect that from Notre Dame's defense. So it implies that the question kind of implies like the offense throughout the game hasn't been the best. And so that gives you a little less faith. I think like just generally, I do believe that they can move the ball in a 2-minute situation. Like let's say it's 27-24, and you're down and you got to get a field goal or try to score a touchdown. I do believe in them because to your point, like I think Riley Leonard he's a competitor and he's the kind of guy where it's like, however it's been going, I'm going to make the plays that I need to make. Right. And I do count on him for that, the NIU game notwithstanding, but we're going to get into in a second, just like how different Notre Dame is now than they were at the time. In terms of how they're playing. So we'll get into that in a second, but that's a good question. T Sullivan 08. What scares you the most about this opening round game? Is it specific to the opponent or would it be more of a challenge of the environment, pressure over the first ever home game or situation, finals week, etc. So what scares you the most about it? Is it the player, or is it the team that they're facing, the circumstances? What is it for you?
I think the finals week is one of those things where it's just like, because they've never had to deal with that during it. Also,
But by the
by the
way,
way,
I think they're doing kind of like finals week this week.
yeah,
I think it's finals week, but I think a lot of professors, they get this stuff done a week ahead of time.
yeah. I mean, I imagine that in these circumstances, there were concessions made.
Yeah, they'll make accommodations. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that you know, that I don't, it's kind of hard to tell, but whatever. People stressed out about certain things. I don't know, right? We'll see. But I don't think the pressure of a first ever home playoff game, I think like the crowd is gonna be like lit. It's gonna be crazy for Notre Dame. I think um that's all like the good kind of thing. Like they're on your side. And especially because Notre Dame has spent like 10 weeks of like gaining the trust of the fan base or whatever,
Yeah.
that I don't see like where, like the Louisville game where they gave up the early touchdown and there was a lot of like a lot of sighs, a lot of groans, whatever. I don't think that there's going to be as much of that because you're going to kind of let the game play out. So I don't think that will be an issue. I think it's more opponent specific, and Indiana's a good football team, right? They're a good football team. They've played well all season for the most part, and they do have some dudes on their team. I wouldn't say they're as loaded as a lot of other teams, but they have guys that if you don't play well, they're definitely going to beat you. They're definitely going to beat you, right? So it's one of those things where it's a challenge. It's a good team. Anytime you're playing a good team, you don't want to like lose the turnover battle. You don't want to have like mistakes that could cost you and all that. But I just think that it's going to be interesting to me with Indiana. They're obviously going to come in super confident and like cocky, and I imagine they're going to talk lots of stuff. But I think like Notre Dame, this team specifically, really like kind of responds to that, and I think that will like fire up Notre Dame in a good way.
There's an I'm your Huckleberry kind of vibe to this team. Like they're about it. Like, like you want the smoke, then okay, like let's go. Like that. This team will not be intimidated. I promise you that. Yeah, I think for me it's the my biggest concern is the layoff. Because I've been pretty consistent that I think Indiana's good. I think they're a good football team. I think Notre Dame is one of the best. They're playing one of the best football, like among the best football that this is being played in the country right now. And there's data to back that up, right? It's not my opinion as much as like there's reasons to think that. And so my concern is like, does the layoff kind of bring that down a little bit, right? Do they come out off their peak, and are they able to kind of keep up that level of play? That's basically where I'm at. I think Notre Dame's playing really great football at the moment, or they were when the season ended. So we'll see how things go next week. But that's my biggest concern. It's not that I don't think, and it's not and I'm not trying to minimize Indiana. I think they're a good football team. I just think Notre Dame's better, and they've been better. So that's my main concern. I'm not worried about finals. I think that's going to be taken care of. Weather's interesting, right? Like that's an interesting variable that's going to come up. It was brought up in the chat. Let's see. Let me see if I could find one. Where is it here? Someone posted the weather situation. Here we go. S Rock from Weather World for South Bend on December 20th. Blizzard Friday. Temperatures as high of 28 Fahrenheit. Low temperature 15. Probability of snow 86%. That's a variable, right? There's a question about that later, so we'll get into who it favors. But
I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's like that's so funny. Like, not that I'm questioning anyone who's just throwing it in there. I'm not going to question that you looked it up or whatever. But although I've never heard of Weather World, but I just saw someone post yesterday that it was like oh, it's going to be like 38 degrees and no wind or whatever. So like, I think you got to
Yeah.
look way closer to game time and see
Yeah,
what
I
it
mean,
is
it is the
because
Midwest. Like
yeah.
it is the Midwest. Like I remember for the Louisville game, the day of, it was
Oh, Gray got cut off, but yeah, it's just to kind of reiterate that Louisville game, it was supposed to be much different weather at that time, and then all of a sudden it just started raining before, and then it's like wind started to like pick up, and it became a factor, right? So I was just carrying on from what you were saying about the Louisville game, how like it was not supposed to be like that, and then all of a sudden it's just
yeah,
like wow, it's
it
raining,
was it
and
wasn't
it
supposed to be
just yeah,
wet. Yeah, it
yeah.
wasn't supposed to be wet at all, and then it was. So that's something to something to keep in mind. So we're gonna have to just see. We'll see. Then that was like again day of. It said like 6% chance of precipitation. Game starts and it's drizzling. Right. So that's the deal. Oh man, I lost the questions. Gosh darn it. All right. Anything? But while I bring these up, any other questions, Jamie, that you want to or like any other concerns that you have while I bring up these questions?
I mean, I think not having that break that what you were saying, like I think yeah, that could have an impact on both teams, but I also think that um Notre Dame and how they practice, um, they will be like ready from that perspective. Like they're gonna
Marcus is
they have very physical practices. So like
Marcus is not the kind of guy who eases off.
yeah, so I don't think that um I don't think it's gonna be like a huge like, oh my gosh, it's gonna take him a quarter to get into the game. I don't think that.
Yeah. All right. I got the questions back. We're back. Next question from JM. The team will have had almost 3 weeks off to prepare for IU. That's a ton of time to give Golden and Denbrock to self scout and improve. What changes do you expect to see on the defensive and offensive sides of the ball in the playoff compared to the regular season? Do you think there will be major changes? I don't. I don't think that.
No, I don't think there'll be major changes. Tweaks, right? Tweaks. So it's just
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
I think one of the things that I would say with on defense is I would look at like, some of like the pressures and stuff, maybe stuff that like they had like early in the season that they haven't run for like a really long time that, go back to some of that. Or like, hey, this is the time to like introduce some new stuff that you haven't done in terms of like what you're doing in terms of the menu on third down or whatever,
Yeah.
right? Just a couple things here and there. And I think with the offense, I don't think there's too much that you are going to add into, what they do in terms of like self scouting of like, hey, we need to change this or change that, because I think they've been like really efficient with a lot of things. I think it'll be more about like tweaking some things in the run game and more like just counters off of stuff that the regular base stuff
Mhm.
that they've done. And I think that's something that, Denbrock did earlier as well, but really well. So I think that's something that'd be something to monitor.
These tweaks are, I think they'll be game specific to opponents.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
It won't be self scouting. It'll be opponent scouting and inputting things that you think will be very effective against them. And you might have more things because you have more time, right? And you have more time to hone in on what they do and what you want to do against them, right? So you have more time to practice that. Like, so, we talked about the script last time. I think the scripts in this game are going to be pretty important in terms of like, the USC game, right? USC did not score any points on their opening script and Notre Dame scored 7, and like that goes a long way towards winning when USC takes the ball first and fails and you get the ball and score. And again, like that happened at the end of after the second half kickoff too. Like Notre Dame scored on their opening script of both halves in that game, which is it's a huge deal, right? That's a huge part of like game management and being able to just take control. So that'll be interesting to watch in this game. Another question from JM. Question 2: give your best shot at estimating Notre Dame's odds at winning it all. I think they're 10-1 last time I saw to win the national championship. They're kind of a trendy pick right now to at least make the title game. I don't know, man. Like they're good. They're really good. They're as good as there's got Chris Schreiber says it's 77% right now, so basically 18% to win it all. And that's basically just like any random team that's the 7 seed, like how you got to run the table, right? How likely is it that you run the table? I don't know. I think they're I don't want to get too much into it because you got to win rounds and there's like a long way to go. But I just this team's really good. I think they have a really good chance.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what I mean, I have really no idea how like odds makers come up with like,
Yeah.
hey, this team is 18 to 1 to win it all, whatever. Like, I mean, I know that they're right most of the time in terms of like, they're making money off of it, so they have a good idea of what people bet on and all that stuff. So I don't know what the real odds of them winning it. I just, like I said, from the piece that I did earlier in the week, they are, one of the top contenders. They check a lot of boxes that need to be checked. But there's a lot of variables that go in it, and every team right now is a good team that someone can lose to if you don't play your best or people make mistakes. And I think one of the things too that not to derail this, but just like with Indiana, which I think is going to be interesting, is that when they talk about the pressure of the home game of like, hey, Notre Dame's going to play in this home game, it's like, well, Indiana never played in like a pressure situation all year, and then all of a sudden they got into a pressure situation where it's like, oh my gosh, we can't move the ball in the Michigan game again in the second half. Yeah. And Elijah Surratt was a very good player for them, had a great year. Man, he had 2 like huge drops for big plays that hit him like right in the hands. Like he's got to make those. Like, right. And he's not a guy who's dropped a lot of balls, so it's like, but the pressure was certainly a factor there, right? So I think that's all stuff that you just can't tell until you're going to get there. Like, I mean, we don't know how good Gunnar Stockton is going to be. Like, I mean, he was great in that one moment. That could be his one moment, and that's it. Or he could be the next Cardale Jones, and so we'll see what happens.
I mean, look, I think just to kind of answer our own question here, like Notre Dame, when it was Alabama, when people thought it was Alabama, no, they had Notre Dame favored. When there's hypothetical matchups against Georgia, Notre Dame's favored. And I know some of that is because Stockton is the quarterback and it's not Carson Beck, but like when would Notre Dame ever be favored on a neutral field against, well, not neutral field against Alabama, but on a neutral field against Georgia? When would Notre Dame ever be favored? Never. Like, yeah. Never. So, especially since Georgia's become what they've become. So, it's a pretty good chance, in my opinion. T. Sullivan or T. Sullivan 08, referring to Bud's graphs below, how would you interpret the relative movement again amongst Notre Dame and other college football teams, in particular Indiana and Georgia, between these two periods? So this is a really good question. I usually see all of Bud Davis's graphs. Check out Bud Davis on Twitter. He's a great follow for graphs and information and analytics and stuff like that. So I got the graphs here. So this is weeks 1 through 3. EPA per play.
So the first 4 games, yeah.
So the first 4 games, yeah. So you've got Notre Dame in the upper right quadrant, right? So that's where you want to be, right? They're I think kind of around the same in terms of good defense, good offense kind of thing, right? They're playing behind Miami, Ole Miss, Alabama, Ohio State. Let's see, Georgia is right up there with defense. Notre Dame had a better offense in the start of the season. Indiana, you'll see, is a good amount of good offense, and the defense is still in the proper quadrant, right? So you want to be on the upper right. Basically, you've got a good defense, you've got a good offense, right? The further up to the top of the upper right, the further up there you get is you're playing really, really well, right? You want to be up where Alabama is, basically, right? Or Ohio State or Ole Miss or Miami. You're one of the better teams. and you see where Georgia is. Here's Notre Dame weeks 4 through 14. This is why I say, like, Notre Dame is playing really, really well as anyone, if not better than everyone in college football. Okay. Upper right quadrant, huge improvement. Indiana's taken a little step back on offense. They rose up a little bit on defense. So they haven't really improved. They've remained steady. They haven't like fallen off a cliff or anything like that. They've remained steady, gotten a little bit worse on offense. Georgia has fallen is fallen pretty far down on the defensive side of things, right? The offense, I think, compared to the first chart, the offense got a good bit or a little bit better EPA per play offense, but the defense has fallen off, right? What do you make of this change for Notre Dame? What do you make of? By the way, look, it's hard to see on the first graph. SMU is basically all the way on the left of the top left for. So they had a good defense the whole time. The offense was terrible. They made the quarterback change. Look where they are now.
Yeah,
they're doing some really good stuff since they made that quarterback change. So, but what do you make of this? All this information here that you're looking at, Jamie?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just kind of fits with where Notre Dame's team was at, and really like what kind of what we thought about Notre Dame too, was that they had a lot of, it was going to take time for the offensive line to grow into it. Obviously it took time for Riley Leonard to grow into the offense, and I thought like he adjusted, Mike Denbrock adjusted to him. They got a little bit healthier on the offensive side of the ball as the season went on too. That helped. And, all of a sudden guys like, Mitch Evans was like, man, they weren't really finding ways to get him the ball. And then all of a sudden they did. And it was just like, there's a lot of factors that went into it. And even though there wasn't like one guy who kind of emerged as a receiver, there were plenty of guys who had like, hey, this guy had like a game, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of happened over that time. And obviously Love just took it to another level as well, in addition to the offensive line getting better. So I think that had a lot to do with the offense. And then I think with the defense, like they lost so many guys to injuries, but the guys who have replaced them, who are most of them like really young, have gone better. Like Leonard Moore is better now than he was when he played in the Louisville game, right? That's definitely for sure. Like he was awesome in that USC game, right? Like there's a lot of that too, where guys like Burnham, Tui Halamaka, Bryce Young up front, some of these guys who were replacing up front, Donnie Heinisch, it might not mean that much to say like, oh, because they're not like game wreckers or whatever, but they've gotten better. So the totality of everything's gotten better, while it's like catching up to some of the other guys that were already doing well. And like, I mean, you can point to so many guys like Drake Bowen, like just taking a big jump. There's so many of these guys that they're just like, they're getting this is their first full season for so many of those guys as starters or contributors. So I think it totally makes sense that they would make that jump, and they've just played better and better as the season's gone along. There really hasn't been a lot of dips, and that's kind of the thing that has really kind of stood out there. And then I would say too, with like Georgia, it's just like, I think it just shows they're just so maddenly inconsistent, and that's how they've been the whole year, right? Like, Kirby talks a lot. They come out, they beat Tennessee, and then they have a couple stinky ones after that, and then they go to 8 overtimes with Georgia Tech, right? And they really struggle they won the Texas game, but they didn't have nearly the same amount of success that they had the previous Texas game and all that, right? So, and then I think with like IU is like pretty steady actually, like compared to where they've been, and they've been pretty good the whole year. But I think they dipped a little bit, but that's because And I know this opponent adjusted. It's because they played those other teams, like the Michigans and the teams that are more talented than them.
Yeah.
And they hadn't really played teams that were like so much more talented than them. They played like middle of the pack, lower tier Big Ten teams for most of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they played even a Michigan team that isn't that good, they still have dudes like, and they had dudes they couldn't block, and they had dudes that couldn't get open against in the secondary. So I think that's something that has kind of showed why they didn't just rise. They didn't rise, and then also too, like depth wise, like they've had some injuries up front in the line that hurt them, and has helped them take a step back too.
Like, here's the other part, right? With Indiana, is you look at where Louisville is here, top right quadrant. You look at where Texas A&M is, top right quadrant. You look at where even Georgia Tech, top right quadrant, right? Notre Dame has wins over 3 teams that are just in that area of the chart, right? Indiana doesn't have any wins against teams in the top right of the chart.
No, they don't.
Their best one is Michigan, and they're all the way over on the left, right? Like Notre Dame beating USC is a better, because at least the USC they're on the bottom right, it's like barely of the defense, but their offense is on the right side of the thing, right? Like Notre Dame beating USC on the road the way they did, like that's better than that's Notre Dame's 4th best, right? I mean, and the thing is like it's like I don't see where Army is on this chart. I'm sure Army is. I don't know that they're.
Well, they're not, because this is just Power 5. Yeah.
This is just Power 5. Army would be on the top right. You know, like they don't like Notre Dame has a bunch of like people will say whatever you want about their schedule. Say whatever you want. Look at how the teams that they're playing and have beaten are playing. Look how they're playing. They are where they are, right? Like I'm not like, so the reason that I'm high on Notre Dame is I'm not making this up. Like I think they're good because, I cover Notre Dame and all those other things. Like they are playing the way that they are playing, and the data is the data. What can you say? Right. So that just kind of like, look, that informs me about how I feel about things. So this was a good question, and I'm really happy this question came in, because I was able to look at this chart, and it really brought some good stuff to the conversation here. So thank you for that question. Drew Brennan 77. Does Rourke's accuracy in Indiana's quick slant game scare you? I feel Notre Dame has seen teams in the past focus on quick slants in order to combat Notre Dame's defense. It does not allow for our Notre Dame's pass rush to get home, with accuracy and slants being a strength of Indiana's. Curious if you think they will focus on this on Friday night. They're definitely going to try to focus on the things they're good at, right? Just like, Notre Dame will try to focus on the run game. Like you focus on your strengths. This is where I think the weather comes in. Quick passing game, timing throws, short area throws when you got to fit it into spaces. It's just not easy. Like to do that in the cold. Forget snow, right? Forget that. If it's cold, it's windy. You got to be precise with your passing game. Like that's just difficult, right? It's not LA. It's 70 degrees and no wind. It's not like that. That type of game is going to be a lot harder to play. I'm not going to say they can't do it. It's going to be a lot harder to do that in South Bend, being the type of team that Indiana is. Like it's much more difficult to be efficient the way that they want to play offense with the weather than it is for Notre Dame, in my opinion. Where do you think, or what do you think about?
I want to point out too, Curtis Rourke, Canadian. He's Canadian, and he played at Ohio, so he's played in a lot of like bad weather games. So I don't want to take anything away from him from that perspective in terms of how that will impact him. But in saying that,
I'm not saying. But by the way,
yeah.
I want to point out, it has nothing to do with his ability to do it. It's a practical conversation. It's a lot
for sure.
more
it's harder for everyone.
That's all I'm saying. Right.
It's harder for everyone. But sorry, I got a chuckle when I saw this question, because I feel love you, Drew. I really appreciate he always asks good questions in these things too. But I really no. Because if you watch the Michigan and the Ohio State games, and they weren't getting those.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't and watch those games, and their receivers couldn't get open in man coverage. They couldn't win just straight one-on-ones, right? So many of those times too were Curtis Work. A lot of the stuff they do is RPO based, right? So they don't have the numbers in the box. He's throwing it. He's throwing that slant almost blind, right? If he thinks, hey, I got one-on-one here, I'm throwing it. Well, those guys weren't winning though. Yeah. And he's not someone who's going to pull it and when that guy doesn't win and run it the way that Leonard can.
Yeah.
So he would throw it and try to fit it, and it would be like the tightest window possible. And unless that ball is perfect, even if that ball is perfect, it's still like a really tough throw. And it's still going to be a tough catch. And, they were getting Michigan and Ohio State was like taking that away. They were like, that's not going to happen. You're not going to get this. And you're playing against Notre Dame in man coverage, who plays as much man coverage as anyone. I'm sorry, that's not going to be there for them a lot. I mean, they're going to have to take chances down the field. And I think we could kind of lead into the Rajon had the question about the 50-50 things, but you don't have to find it, whatever. But okay. he I believe he asked about it. Sorry if this is whatever. Sorry if it's not the exact what you asked, Rajon, but essentially, like, I think if you watch some of the games, if you watch just like the highlights of Indiana on the air, you see the receivers, yeah, these guys are winning a lot of 50-50 back shoulder stuff. But on the season, their receiver group is under 50% on contested catches. And they weren't making those plays against Michigan and Indiana. So when we're talking about comparable defensive back play, remember, Will Johnson did not play in that game for Michigan either. So you can't say, well, they don't have Ben Morrison. Well, they didn't have Will Johnson. Hey, I'm sure they'll catch some of those. They're not going to catch most of them. They won't, because they haven't. Because those passes have to be so perfect, and the guy has to make such an incredible catch when the coverage is that good. And also, too, that's how, when you're relying on that, that's how Christian Gray is getting picks and stuff like that one, against USC too, right? So I think that is, one of the things that, do I expect them to go at Christian Gray quite a bit? Because, yeah, for sure. They're going to go at him. They're going to try to draw penalties. They're going to try to go. Yeah, I definitely think they do. But I also think that if they go at him like too much and they keep trying him and just doing those things, he will make plays on the ball and they're going to lose, because Christian Gray can match up with their guys. And I think they have good receivers, but someone else mentioned in the chat too that they don't have as good a receiver. They're not as good as Louisville's receivers, in my opinion. Like, I don't think, like, I think they have like 4 good receivers, really good one. And Surratt is very good. He's very good, but I don't think he's as good as Ja'Cory Brooks. And I don't think any of their slots are as good as Colin Lacey, or
Kai Lemon.
Yeah, they're not, right? They're good players. Don't get me wrong. They're good players. I think Notre Dame would want them on their team, but they're not. There's a reason why those guys didn't have dominant games there. And it's also, there's a reason why, Rourke didn't have great games there, because it's like he needed them to be like superheroes in order to get some of that stuff, because so much of his passes this year, and he's great against like zone and layering it over the middle. He really throws the ball really well over the middle of the field. But some of the stuff when it's really like tight coverage and tight windows, and some of this might be due because he had a thumb surgery as well on his throwing hand. That might be something. But his accuracy has just not been as good as you would think for, based on what his percentages are. A lot of times his accuracy's been good because they've had guys running wide open in a lot of things.
I mean, yeah. I mean, Indiana, they're going to go at Gray. I mean, all of them, they have to, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's how they got to move the ball. And they'll do, look, they'll try to take advantage of Notre Dame playing a ton of man, right? Like we've seen,
sure.
like they'll try screens, they'll try wide receiver screens, they'll try crossers, they'll try mesh routes, right? They're going to try all that stuff because they need to. Because that's how teams have done it against Notre Dame. Put the linebackers in conflict, things of that nature. 1980 UI grad. You've probably answered this question in other videos. Outside of getting more kids on campus in the fall for games, what would be a couple of things the staff could do to improve recruiting even further? Well, they need to get the receiver room, you need to get in on more guys early. They're kind of off to a slow start there. Like, you need to make inroads, find out who's into you and who you can get and who you can lock in. And the other part is you got to pick the right guys. Like Derek Meadows, the amount of attention that he got, it just was a, I don't want to say a waste, but it's it was misguided. It could have gone to another player who was more likely to come. Maybe doesn't have the physical attributes, but I mean, look, I don't want to say they were misled. I mean, there were reasons that they went for it, right? They thought they had a really good chance to land him, and then it turned out the way it turned out, right? I think it's kind of that stuff, right? Like, you went in on Deuce Knight and you go through all that process, and in the end, it just seemed like he was always going to be in the South, and you kind of need to be able to identify that stuff, right? Who is worth your time? Because time is something that you just don't get back, especially in recruiting. Can't go backward, right? And so that's the part where it's identifying who's worth the time that you're putting into it and getting the best players from that group of, the people you feel like, okay, this is a good use of our our recruiting capital, our recruiting resources.
Yeah, I would say kind of building off what you said with Meadows, you have to understand what matters to not just him, but to the uncle, the dad, whatever, all that kind of stuff in terms of money and all that kind of stuff and whatever. You got to figure that out quicker. I think that's something that and maybe it changed. I think it flipped a little bit for Meadows compared to what it was. But if you anticipate that this guy is a stud and he is going to be a 5-star, you think he's going to be that, then you have to think that, hey, this is going to happen. And you have to anticipate what is going to, what that might mean for that kid. Right. And I think that's something I think they could do a better job of, certainly, because I think they get down the road with some of these kids and then all of a sudden it becomes well, like you said, misguided resources a little bit too much there. I also think you gotta have a little bit wider net when it comes to the official visit time and all that. And I understand they have had success at narrowing down to these guys and focusing on them, and they've landed a lot of them, right? They land a lot of them, but I think one of the things was when you saw this year where they didn't do well with the officials in terms of the guys that were the top guys that they wanted and closing in on them. And then you're just thinking man, they really should have widened that net at that time. So then it's you had more fallbacks at that time instead of being well, we got to move on to plan B and plan C there. They should already have plan B should be on campus, where they didn't have the last official visit weekend wasn't even a visit weekend, right? Why aren't you just getting those guys on there at that time anyways, or something like that? Planning that ahead better. I think that was something that was a mistake this year that hopefully they rectify for next year.
Yeah. There's a conversation going on in the chat about Ben Morrison versus Leonard Moore. I guess so. It was pointed out that Morrison has better pure coverage stats. I actually went and looked at this right now because I was curious to see. Leonard Moore has given up 47% completion, 17 of 36 against. BMO was giving up 44%, which is very, very good. It's very good for both of them, frankly. It's like it's better than like Christian Gray, for example. The thing is that Leonard Moore has 7 forced incompletions already, which is kind of insane, actually. The PFF has him down for 4 passes broken up. I know that he has more than that on the official stats. It's probably closer to 8. He has the 2 picks. The thing is that Leonard Moore has given up the touchdowns. He gave up the 1 touchdown against Louisville, which was a great
ridiculous catch.
It's a great throw and catch. Is actually really good coverage, but he did give it up. He did give up a touchdown, and then the one at the end against USC, which was another ridiculous catch, by the way. It was like one-handed. It was also when the game was over. It's kind of unfair to kind of hold that against him, but I don't really want to get into who's better. What I will say is Leonard Moore's production on the ball, to me, is very, very impressive. It's very impressive.
Awesome. It's awesome.
It's like you don't like he's had a full season's worth of he almost had a full season's worth of ball production against USC than like Cam Hart had like in all of 2022, where it's like he didn't give up a ton of catches, but like he also he didn't like have any pass breakups. He didn't have any picks. And obviously, if you're not giving up catches, then you're fine. You're doing a good job. And Cam Hart's a starter in the NFL right now. But it just goes to show like Leonard's Moore's ball production is kind of insane for a guy who's like, I mean, what are the chances? Like, what are the chances? It's almost like you want to discount him because it's like, no way they have another guy who's as good as BMO as a freshman, right? I think the thing that he doesn't have, the thing that BMO had as a freshman, is he had those insane interception numbers. But when you add in the passes broken up and things of that nature, like Leonard Moore's pretty close. He's good. He's a good football player, that Leonard Moore. Irish Bronx. This is a really good question. Who has more yards versus Indiana? Mitchell Evans receiving or Jadarian Price rushing? What do you think?
I mean, I thought it was a really good question. I couldn't really come up with a definitive answer of who I thought it would be because I could see either of them having pretty significant games. Like if you told me Jadarian Price broke like 2 big runs that just like all of a sudden he's got like 90 yards because of it.
Yeah.
I mean, easily could see that. And also think that like, Mitchell Evans is going to be an interesting guy in this game because they play first of all, they play a 4-3 most of the time, right? They play 4. I mean, they have a nickel, right? But they play standard. They play 4-3 quite a bit, and they play Jalen Walker, who is, a smaller linebacker who's a great athlete, right? Really, really good athlete, playmaker, super, freaky, really good pass rusher. But that's a guy that they match up with tight ends a lot. But he's smaller. And that is someone that you're like, I mean, I think he'll definitely stick to Evans. But if you throw it up to Evans, maybe Evans comes down with a couple of big catches like that. And also, too, I think like, you could see like, I don't think their safeties are that great, to be honest. They're okay. And that's something else that you could, you kind of see. And then one of the things too with that I thought like Chip Kelly and Ohio State did a great job of was like they dropped their their version of a Viper to the boundary like quite a bit, like a much higher percentage than Notre Dame does, right? Or like I want to say like probably 30% of the time or something like that, right? On pass downs. Well, if that guy gets matched up in a thing where he's just dropping to a zone, but you have a receiver out there, or a tight end or whatever, it's like that's a tough cover for that guy, right? It's going to be a tough cover for him, right? So, especially when there's something that's like, hey, you're going to throw it over his head or into like a window there, like that's something I could see like Evans doing, and having success too. So I think it's on the table for both those guys have big games.
Yeah, I think so. We saw USC not match 11 personnel with nickel. We saw them, and maybe it was a goal line thing, or they were close to the goal line red zone thing, where on the Raritan touchdown, right? They stayed heavy because they felt like we'll take our chances with the slot against our safety on the other side of the field. But then you had a linebacker matched up against Raritan, and Notre Dame exploited that, right? And that's what teams, if they want to do that, then because you're afraid to get run on, then it's like, okay, there's a mismatch for Notre Dame there. I'm going to take Price because, I could see Mitchell Evans having like 2 for 35 or something in this game. Price could have a 47-yard run. And like, I don't think Evans is going to have like a 47-yard catch, like that's the problem. Like Jadarian Price, he could have 5 carries for 16 yards and then he can have a 47-yard run. And it's like, well, now he has 63 yards. And I don't know that Evans, that would be Evans' season high. Right. So that's why I'm going to go with Price on this one, just because of the explosive ability on this. But it's a good question. It was intriguing for me for sure. Exert ND 1994. What do you think each team having 3 weeks before they play the game does to their performance? Will it mean both teams will be sharp with that time off and time to prepare, or will both teams be slow to start because it's too much time off? I mean,
we kind of already talked about this.
Right, we talked about it, and it's like it's variable that we don't know. I think it could go any kind of way. They could come out prepped and both teams are sharp, and they could come out rusty, and it's like both teams kind of have a slow start. Like kind of anything's on the table there. It's one of those things like it's hard to predict.
Yeah, but I don't think it's going to take either team too long to settle into the game.
Right. I agree. Stonewall 20. Does the team ever practice at 8:00 at night to simulate game conditions? How does it work for night games?
I mean, I don't know. Actually, I don't know specifically how Notre Dame handles night games in terms of, they don't practice like that during the week because you can't, right? Like, people have, you have studies and stuff at night. You have, your schedule wise, you keep the same for practice during.
Plus, you want them to get to sleep.
Yes. Would they do a night before, like do that walkthrough at night before or like whatever? Yeah, that's definitely stuff that happens that they do to kind of prepare it. And there's so much stuff too where they like study like body clock stuff and you do this to prepare yourself here and there. Like that is something that happens, but it's not something like you don't see that too with like NFL teams aren't like being like playing Monday night this week, so we gotta like do it all the time. It's not enough of a change where it's like you totally have to like your body clock is whatever. You do things to adjust the day of and whatever and the day before in terms of like your prep for it, but it's not totally like the whole week you're just going at night the whole time.
So Notre Dame, they play at night a lot, right? Not a new thing for them. Has Indiana played at night this year? Ohio State game was day. It was noon.
Ohio State game was day. Michigan game might have been afternoon, and then it kind of turned into night. You know what? I'm not sure.
They haven't played at 8:00. So it might be.
But they don't play too. They don't play too many of those prime time. They don't get. Indiana doesn't get the prime time matchups.
Yeah,
fair to say.
Yeah, Chris Schreiber says Michigan was 3:30 kick. It might be a factor for them. Notre Dame plays at night all the time, so I don't think for Notre Dame's team it'll be a big deal. But for IU, that might be something just for them to deal with. I don't know that at any point we're going to watch the game and be like, well, it's a night game. This is what cost them. It's just something that they need to deal with. It's a variable that might contribute to something. What we got, Chris Schreiber says UCLA was 3:30. Western Illinois was 7.
Oh, big primetime matchup, Western Illinois.
Primetime, Western Illinois, 7:30 UCLA. Okay. Irish KG07. What aspect of Notre Dame's game will benefit most from the rest and extra practice? D-line due to getting crossback. I think the O-line and D-lines are the answer here. If you saw Billy Stroud in that USC game, I mean, how did he do that? I have no idea. He was moving terrible. He was limping. He was favoring his ankle so much in that game. On the sideline, he could barely walk, and then he goes out there and plays. He needed time. I'm sure all of them needed time. I'm sure Anthony Knapp could use time. And then the D-line with Cross for one, and then just, they've all played a ton of snaps. I think the lines specifically benefit the most. And you know what? Like, I'll bet you Mitch Jeter benefited from this time in trying to get himself right. I would say the D-lines and Mitch Jeter are my answers to this. What do you think?
It definitely makes sense. I mean, I think getting Cross back just period, I think is huge. I think it's probably the biggest thing. And then I think that I would add the DBs too, because I think in that last game to play that many amount of reps, especially the way the game finished with so many just like vertical balls they had to deal with. Jordan Clark got banged up in that game. Xavier Watts got banged up in the game. I mean, you need those guys as healthy as possible. So yeah, there too.
All right. Next question from Duke Sinatra. I know it was limited snaps and garbage time, but did you like what you saw from Tay Johnson and Sevillano at the end of the year? Johnson looked long and was physical. Sevillano seemed to have decent quickness for his size, played hard, and made several tackles in just a few snaps. Thanks, guys. I'll just say on Tay Johnson, we saw very limited, like to the point. I like that he was out there, that he's shown enough to where it's like, we'll put it in a game and go do whatever he might do. They don't need to play him. They could play Hurleman. They could play some walk-on. If he hasn't shown them anything in practice, they won't put him out there, right? The fact that they put him out there and that he was a guy who was transitioning to the secondary period and trying to learn the secondary, had to learn safety, and then they put him in the boundary because of transfer and injury. That to me is encouraging beyond whatever he showed in the game. And he didn't show anything bad, but it's like, he had I think it was Florida State where he came up and made a tackle, or maybe it was Virginia, came up and made a tackle on a screenplay. Like, that's good stuff. Like, good job by you there. Yeah. But to me, the fact that they even put him out there is encouraging. What do you say about Sevillano here?
Yeah, I thought he looked pretty good in some of the garbage time. I'm not one of these guys who tries to overreact to garbage time. Plenty of guys have over the years for Notre Dame have like, wow. Like, I think of Jonathan Jones used to get a lot of attention because like he would just fly around. It wasn't like Jonathan Jones wasn't a bad player. And I think he transferred to Lido and ended up being like pretty good for them and stuff too. But, just because someone does something in garbage time, it doesn't mean that it always is like translatable. Like it's more of like you want to see it like it's different if you see like what Kennedy Urlacher did in the second half of Purdue than any of these guys. No offense to these guys, right? But it's just facts. And then I think that, but I think Sevillano, like, I think he's looked pretty good. I still think he needs to get into better shape. But I think he does. He's got good initial quickness. I think he's going to be a guy who has a good shot at being in the rotation next year. And I've heard good things about him too. So I'm excited. I'm excited about both those guys in their futures.
Scout Team Player of the Year for Sevillano. That's meaningful. Again, as much as anything, right? It's as much as anything he showed in the game, Scout Team Player of the Year. That's good. Riley Leonard 13 for Heisman. I know I'm late and haven't caught up, so I don't know if this was brought up, but hey, Greg, any reason why you were watching Notre Dame Virginia last night? I've been watching all the games, so it's one of the games. That's why I was watching Notre Dame Virginia. Yeah, I'm on to Virginia. I need to watch Army a little bit more. Gosh, that Army tape is. Don't play in a baseball stadium. That tape is awful from like the angle. It's good Lord.
Yeah.
This is unbecoming, is what I say to that. Mick Irish 3. Any chance Notre Dame is working on getting Riley Leonard another year due to injuries he's had in the past? Listen, I've been on this for like a month, and Jamie knows this. Notre Dame has a law school, do they not? Get a lawyer on the phone, bring up some litigation. Riley Leonard, get him back here for another year. He's going to win the Heisman. Win the Heisman Trophy. Him and Jeremiah Love can go 1-2. I'm joking, but I'm not joking. Like, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. But like, they should be trying. Someone look into it. 2, does the playoff games count towards your 4 games you can play before you redshirt? If not, are the redshirt guys on offense who could see playing and same on defense? So that's actually a good question.
Yeah, it doesn't count. You could all the guys can play.
You could play 8 games. That's amazing.
Yeah.
God,
well, they had to do it because it was like it's unprecedented this number of games, and it's just like it's just would be you don't know what the injury situations are going to be like too. They don't want anyone going into a situation where it's like all of a sudden some team loses so bad in like the national championship game because they like they were down to their third string
and they're not playing viable players because
yes, right. So that's why they don't want to get into that. So that's why they made that rule. So it doesn't count.
Is there anyone you think this is relevant for?
Right now I couldn't say because there isn't anyone that I've heard like is on the verge of doing that, but I don't know. I don't think there is anyone necessarily. It'll probably be like more of like, hey, there's an injury and something that's like, well, now we need to elevate this guy up, and it's like we have the chance to. My guess would be like a Micah Gilbert or something like that, someone like that, right? To be able to do that. But I mean, no one really else sticks out as like on offense of who they would. I guess maybe Keedron Young, but probably not. Like I mean, they would have to have it's all injuries, right? So it's like I mean, on defense, I don't really see anyone out of that's been like that. That it's just it'll all be kind of due to injuries, unless there's a defensive back that they're just like, hey, we want to actually like work this guy. But it's like it's playoffs, so you can't really like, hey, get this guy a series. You better be freaking confident about him, right? So it's like I don't really see it unless they're dealing with injuries and they need to kind of go somewhere with it.
Yeah. Chris Shiver's asking, was there any confirmation of Rubio into the portal? There was not. He didn't go in the portal. It was just a mistake by On3. It was like typing error, whatever, some error. He did not go in the portal. He's not thinking about going in the portal. But yeah, I don't know. Who could they elevate? There was another player. Logan Saldate, mentioned Logan Saldate. I think they like him, but I just don't see them elevating him to like actual playing. But then the good part is like Notre Dame is not having to do that because they've already gotten guys.
They've played so many
the guys that they like they've played so many freshmen. It's like there's just not that many that can elevate into a playing role when they already haven't. But you can elevate your media company, Jamie. You can absolutely do that. Elevate your media company, your highlight reel, your social media page, whatever it might be. You got a website that you want to bring to the next level, then you can do that with VSR Media, founded by Notre Dame football pregame host and Emmy Award-winning anchor Vahid Saad Wazadeh. VSR Media provides professional and cinematic video and photo. Whether you're looking for a collegiate or pro-level highlight reel, have a personal story to tell, or are aiming to diversify and grow your business, VSR Media specializes in short and long-form video storytelling, social media management, and website design. VSR Media also captures professional headshots, senior, and sports photos. Contact them at vsrmediacompany.com. Mention Irish Sports Daily to receive 20% off your first project. Visit them online or give them a call at 574-800-9106. Next question from the Salty Z Jazz 14. How many 2025 draft picks does this team have? More than last year. 2025 draft picks. I mean, it's Morrison, right? Xavier Watts is one. Howard Cross is one.
I already went through the list. It's like it's probably going to be around the same 7 or 8. I would say
7 or 8. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just Cross, Mills, Watts, Kaiser. Not no guarantees that all of these guys are getting drafted. I'm just saying guys who are possibilities. I'm obviously a good chunk of them are going to get drafted. Morrison, like you said, Leonard, and Mitch Evans. Okay. And that's pretty much it. Like it's I don't think there's anybody. I mean, Oben isn't getting drafted after he had this type of year. There isn't anybody else who's really, Jordan Clark. Sorry, that's
I was going to say. I was wondering if
Jordan Clark. I think Jordan Clark is going to get drafted, and probably not Rod Hurd. Outside shot.
Doesn't he have another year?
I don't think so.
I thought he had 2 years.
I mean, if he has another year, that's big. They could really use him. So,
and if I was him, he could start.
Oh, he will start next year at Notre Dame for sure. If he,
I
would be.
So, I mean, it would definitely be the third safety. I mean, or in some sort of rotation. I just thought I remember thinking like, oh, he's got 2. Like that's valuable. But we'll see.
Hold on a second here. He's class of 2019, so I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so, but yeah.
All right. We'll see. All right. Salty Jazz 2. If Notre Dame beats Indiana and loses competitive game to Georgia, would you classify this season as 1, great, 2, pretty successful, 3, I am delusional and peaked in the 1980s, so natty or bust? If you told me before the year that Notre Dame finishes with 1 regular season loss and wins a playoff game, I'd say it's a truly great season. Wondering if the lack of name brand opponent would tarnish anything for you. So, where do you come out on this? Beat Indiana, lose to Georgia, close.
I mean, I think it would be great because you have to consider the whole the context of all the players that they lost during the season. Because I think if you lose to Georgia close, the whole thing that you're saying after is like, man, they probably would have won if they had BMO or if they had this guy or that guy, right? Which because they've lost like key players, like guys who were going to be difference makers for them, right? So I think that's kind of why you'd go that route if they lost that Georgia game, and admittedly, and most of the guys on Notre Dame, like we talked about, obviously they got a bunch of guys are going to get drafted, but I think most of the guys who have the chance to be like day 1 or day 2 picks are underclassmen, guys who are not draft eligible. So it's where that's not the case with like a lot of these other teams. So I think it would be great. You go 12-2. You come back from the terrible NIU loss, all of that. It would end up being, a great year. Obviously, it would mean so much more. It's like, to me, that's like another level if you go and you beat Georgia and you get to, but it's all uncharted territory, so we don't know.
I think it would be a great season, and it would also be like disappointing because of how good they are. And I think because of how good they are, it makes it a great season, because it's hard to build a team and to get your team playing this well. It's one thing to win games. Like, none of BK's teams have been this good. Well, I'll say it again. Notre Dame, the last time they were top 5 in SP plus offense and defense was 1966. Okay. They have not been this good in a very, very long time. Right. I mean, that's beyond Holtz years, right? Like, when you build a team that is this good, you have done a good thing. And like, I think that we take for granted, like, I think we looked at the schedule and said, it's playoffs or bust. You better make the playoffs. And like, yeah, that's true. But you didn't have to build a team as good as this one. That didn't have to happen. And it's hard to do, and it hasn't been done at Notre Dame. So to me, like, given that, like, yes, it's a great season. If you win, if you beat Indiana, if you don't beat Indiana, like, it's gonna feel pretty hollow, I think. But if you beat Indiana, you win the home game, you lose to Georgia. Like, I think they should beat Georgia is the thing. Georgia has not played well. They needed overtime in the last 2 games, and in my opinion, they needed ref intervention twice. Like, 11, like, I think it was 12 penalties called on Texas in that playoff game in the first half. With, some were declined, some were offsetting or whatever. Like, huge penalties where it's like Texas is going in to score, and it's like, oh, here's a 15-yard penalty.
I mean, that was kind of the difference between Texas being up big and
right. It was. And look, I'm not trying to. My point is that, like, Georgia has not looked that great in the last 2 weeks. One of those against Texas, that's a good opponent. Another one was Georgia Tech at home, and they were getting dog walked. Like, to me, Notre Dame should beat them. They've been better than them this year. If it doesn't happen, you still, like, the way that you built this team, the injuries, like you talked about, you don't have any of your premier pass rushers. You don't have your best corner. You lost the offensive line and all that stuff. To me, it's a great year. It would be disappointing, though, because I think they really have a chance. I do. Probably maybe for the first time, like, since the 90s, where it's like, yeah, I think they truly have a chance to be favored. Right. And I think that the fact that you're even favored against Georgia in a game like that is something, right? I think that's a step. They're never favored in these games ever. It's always like Notre Dame, Georgia minus 10.5, right? Or something. Alabama minus 14.5. These are great teams, but
I think the Alabama one ended up being pretty right. That's
but they ended up right? Yeah. It ended up correct, right? And but that just kind of goes to show where you're at as a program. Okay, Oscar, vamos Irish. Christmas means a Christmas market in your town. Playoffs mean playoff market in South Bend. Instead of mulled wine, it's murky plays. Instead of potato pancakes, it's O-line pancakes. Instead of German egg punch, it's gut punches to the fans. How will this playoff go right before the holidays? Who will have more of murky plays or an effective offense that looks drunk and inefficient? O-line pancakes or an offensive line owning the line of scrimmage and controlling the trenches? German egg punch slash with which fan base will be on the bigger emotional roller coaster with highs and lows and an ultimate gut punch when their team loses? I think this is
for the whole bracket.
Okay, yeah,
it's
the
not
whole
Notre
bracket,
Dame
not just Notre Dame specifically.
Yes, that's the way I took it.
Murky plays or an ineffective offense that looks drunk and inefficient. Who do you think that will be?
I'm gonna say that's gonna be over the course of the whole thing, or just we're talking first round here?
I'll just say first round because you have the most teams.
I'm gonna say maybe I'm gonna regret this, but I was gonna say Indiana.
Oh, okay. All right.
I was going to say Indiana.
All right.
I just got to whatever. Spoiler alert. Guys, I don't like the matchup against Notre Dame's defense, guys. I think it could get murky for them. Yeah, I just think based on how they've performed against similar type of defensive backfield, and I think it could get murky. And how they pick up the blitz against Ohio State, and how many times that he can't escape the rush. Yeah, so that would be my pick for that.
Mine is Ohio State. You got those O-line injuries, man, and that Tennessee D-line is good. And man, that Ohio State offense is just, it can get kind of
That's a good one.
It can get kind of dicey. And I just think like it's gonna not be good. I think, and I'm not saying they'll lose or whatever, because I don't think that Tennessee offense is very good at all, frankly. But I think it'll feel
that's gonna be a low scoring game.
Yeah, and it'll feel like that. And look, man, I to be honest, it would be better for Ohio State if they were on the road, because it's gonna get like kind of dicey in that stadium, and there's just gonna be some weird vibes. I think it's Ohio State. I think that's the one that's gonna look kind of gross for them on offense. O-line pancakes, offensive line, owning line of scrimmage, and controlling the trenches. I'm gonna take Notre Dame. Here. I think they're gonna have a big game against Indiana, because I think they're ready for that. I think they're ready to have a big game there. I think they're really coming together, and I think with the backs with Riley Leonard, I think it's going to look good. So that's why I have O-line.
I mean, I would probably, if I was forced to pick and lean, I would probably pick Notre Dame there, because I just like, but I guess I would go maybe like Penn State versus SMU, although I like SMU's defensive line. I think they're pretty good, but the way that they ran the ball in that,
it looked good.
It looked good. So I think I'm going to go Penn State there. But honestly, I don't think because now you're just getting to a point, everybody's got a good D-line now.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a good D-line. Pretty much everybody's got a good defense. Because you could say, like, man, Texas, who does have a good O-line? Assuming that they get Kelvin Banks back, and you're like, okay, they got a pretty good offensive line that you think they would be able to handle Clemson, but Clemson's, they still got some dudes up front. Like, so it's, I mean, I don't know what the spread is in that game, but I mean, I'd probably bet Texas just no matter what it is. But I think that I don't know if there's going to be dominating O-line. It would be Notre Dame or Penn State for me.
Okay. Fan base will be on the bigger emotional roller coaster, highs and lows, and an ultimate gut punch when their team loses.
Man, I think you kind of stole my thunder a little bit with this, Greg. Was that Ohio State? I think in those games, they just played one of those games that was like a very low scoring affair where it was like they just couldn't get it going. They couldn't, you got Jeremiah Smith, you got Emeka Egbuka, you got Travion Henderson, you got all these dudes there, and it don't matter. And Michigan's defense, yeah, I mean, they got a D line. Ooh, it's scary. Like, those defensive tackles are something. Yeah. But I just, like you said, that Tennessee D line, I don't know. Will Howard, he's had a big year, and he's been good for most of the year. Yeah, he really has, but when we talk about those loud misses, and he's had some bad turnovers.
Yeah.
Some bad turnovers. And I don't know. Like, I kind of think that is a game that's ripe for there. And oh my gosh, Ryan Day and his Just for Men beard. I think he's going to have a tough one. Yeah.
Oh man. All right. I think it's going to be SMU. Yeah, it's going to be tough. I think they're going to play Penn State really well. I think Penn State is going to like luck out in some kind of way.
These are
And
the games that Penn State always wins, I think.
they always win, but it's going to be some fluke thing. It's not going to, they're not going to like look completely dominant. They're not going to look like terrible, but it's just like, I think that's how it's going to go. Unfortunately for SMU, 2 gut punches in a row. You hate to see that, but I think they're going to play well. And I think there's going to be moments where they're like, we're going to do this. And then you don't do this. You don't do it. All right. Irish Legion, how worried are we about IU with the wide receivers win 50-50 balls regularly and the quarterback to hit those chunk plays even against good coverage? We talked about this, I think. IU's D-line seems to shift and move and such a lot right before the snap or right at the snap or right before. This seemed to cause some issues for some O-lines. Do you think Notre Dame's O-line will hold up against that? What do you think?
Well, I mean, it's something that it's less of holding up against it because it's like they're doing it to confuse you, and it is something they're very good at, and they've caused a lot of problems. It's why, Michigan didn't run the ball on them. That's part of the reason why. I mean, obviously too, because they can't throw at all. So they was they can really sell out, but. Ohio State didn't have a ton of success running against them either. And that was partially because they had two different, they had a new O-line working in that game. They had 2 new starters working in that game. But some of it was, the stuff that they do up front to kind of mess with them. And I think people maybe aren't giving IU's defensive line enough credit. It's a good D-line. It's a good D-line. They got a couple dudes. And, I think that there are going to be some times where they that hits big for them. But the one thing that I think you can maybe you would worry about them finishing with some of the stuff because a lot of those guys have trouble finishing against Price and Love. They just have. So and when that happens, you can break something. So I think it'll be about getting them into when you run and being smart about it and, getting it in the right things. Because I think if Notre Dame catches them in the thing too, if you catch them in the right stunt, that can hit big. And Notre Dame is one of the teams that if you don't want to get caught in something. So, which is why you see some of these teams don't do as much of it against Notre Dame because you don't want to get caught in it. So that's something to monitor in this game too.
IU's pass rush doesn't seem that good or consistent without blitzing. Is Notre Dame capable of making them pay for that?
Man, I guess no shots at Irish Legion, but they do got a good pass rush, man. I feel like I'm disagreeing with everything they're saying. They got a good pass rush. They do. I think, their 2 starting interior guys are both plus pass rushers. Not fantastic dynamic guys, but they're plus guys. They can push the pocket. They can do some things. Got some good lateral movement. I think but the main thing is that Walker is Walker is a stud in terms of as a blitzer. So yes, that part is there too. But Mikhail Kamara is the one guy who's if you just single him up the whole game, he can just wreak havoc. So Ohio State doubled them quite a bit, and they just always would chip and they would do different things to them, and that really slowed him down. And he wasn't a big part of that game. But you're going to have to do a lot of stuff where not that Notre Dame is doing too much where they're throwing deep stuff anyways, but you're going to have to do a decent amount of quick game and screens and stuff like that too to kind of slow him down and make him not be a factor because he can be a game wrecker, right? So I think that that is something where if you look at Ohio State in that game, they didn't throw deep in that game. That wasn't something that they didn't. Howard was 80% completions, and it was all short stuff, very short to intermediate stuff. like getting the ball out quick and quickly diagnosing things.
Yeah. And last question from Irish Legion. Do you think they can shut down Notre Dame's running game? Do you think they're going to be effective there?
I think they can slow it down. I don't think they can shut it down. I don't think. I think Notre Dame's the best running game that they'll have played this year. I think by a pretty wide margin. Even if you say I think Judkins and obviously Henderson are good backs, but I mentioned the part about they played in that game with those 2 new old linemen.
Right.
I also don't think, I don't know what it is with Chip Kell this year, because I always thought specifically at UCLA, he was so creative.
He had some really
with some of the stuff with the run game. And I just haven't seen it at Ohio State this year. Doesn't really seem they do. Maybe because they don't feel the same way about the guards, because they used to just do so much pin and pull stuff. And it was man, it was crazy. And it might be because of partly the Big Ten is different in terms of what you can do against something. I don't know, right? But they really don't have that. And the other thing is, IU haven't played a really good dual threat quarterback the whole year. They haven't, right? Not at the level of Leonard, combined with the backs, right? So that is something that I think, it has seemed like in games too, where Notre Dame, you're like, man, Love's had a quiet game. Well, Leonard will rush for 70 or 80 yards, or Price will break one or something. It's too many options. It's too many things there that I think that it's just going to break through eventually.
Next question from Teacher Man 87. What types of activities has Howard Cross been doing to keep from getting rusty as he rehabbed? I don't know. Player like
I respect the question, but I have no idea what he's.
Well, plus, a player like him, he's not going to get rusty. He's too experienced. He did play the majority of the season, so it's not like he hasn't been doing anything.
Yeah.
Right. He knows how to play, and he can go through drills and stuff. But he's not. It's not. And his game isn't predicated on timing, and it's not predicated on needing to be in sync with everybody else. He can go.
I think he's going to hit the ground running. Yeah.
I'm not worried about what he's been doing, but as he ramps up, he goes through drills like he always would. Right. There's no big secret to that. Andy Paul, just check the weather for Friday. It is trending down, getting colder every day. High now 33. Snow forecasted for around 8 p.m. Winds 13 to 15, gusting to 35. I get that weather is unpredictable, but temp and wind can be macro trends driven by larger fronts. Thoughts, who benefits? Again, I just think it's a lot harder. If it gets windy specifically, if it's 35 or whatever, I don't care. If it's windy, that's hard. If there's precipitation, that's hard for a passing game. That's the way they want to play,
If you can't throw it all, if it's get to the point where you can't throw it all, then it's a huge advantage to Notre Dame.
Yeah. They have 3 players who can hurt you there, and it's the basis for everything they kind of do on offense. So let's see. Irish Nut, you were all talking about wide receivers in the portal that they might go after. What have you heard about Gilbert and Williams' progress? Also, it looks like Miller Moss going to Louisville. What are your thoughts? Does Brom help him? I'll do the last part first. I think Miller Moss to Louisville, I think that's a good fit. I think Brom would help him a good amount.
Yes,
they've got a good system. I think that's a really good fit for him. Heard good things on Micah Gilbert. Have for as long as he's been there. I think they like him a lot. Cam Williams, I think he's hurt. Right? I think because he didn't travel to USC.
I don't know what specifically is going on with him. I just know that he he's further behind the other guys in terms of where he started. Where he started in terms of playing the position and actually playing the position. So, by all accounts, he's happy at the school. It's a big spring for him. It's a big spring for him. You want to see where he's at and what kind of progress he makes there.
I'm kind of surprised, Micah Gilbert hasn't gotten any first team stuff. because Notre Dame's had a lot of blowouts. You know, like I feel I'm just kind of because he was there in the spring and they liked him in the spring, and it wasn't a physical problem. So unless he just can't figure out the offense,
Could be blocking. Could be blocking.
It could be a lot of things, right? I'm just surprised that hasn't happened. Not that I think it needs to happen, or I'm not, you
know. Jay Lamont, man. How many coffees you had? Chill out, man. Relax.
I had
relax. He's just ready to go. Just every little thing. He's like,
well, it's hard to say. It's hard because, like, you know, shades of Jordan Johnson, man. Like everyone was like, Jordan Johnson, you got to play him, and Notre Dame's going to be terrible if they don't play him. And now he's like,
you don't know. No one knows. That the thing is that everyone says this about every freshman receiver who doesn't play at whatever. Go look at the portal right now, and some of these guys that are in the portal that are there who like didn't, like, who would have predicted that the 5-star wide receiver that signed with Texas Tech wouldn't be a big factor for them? You'd be like, of course, it's Texas Tech. The guy's going to be like right away just balling. It's like, didn't work out that way.
I don't know what this is about. I'm shocked Angeli hasn't hit him on a skinny post or a go route. They did hit him and he dropped it. I can't remember the opponent. But yeah, I just I like Mikey Gobert a lot. I think he's good. I think he's a good player. To be honest, like Cam Williams, and look at, maybe he will. If he doesn't start showing stuff in the spring, I think it's time to get worried. Two straight springs. I
thought he showed plenty of potential this spring. So it's like, I don't even know about that. It's just, if you don't hear stuff about where he is in the offense, if he's not at least like working with this top kind of group and like working in there, then you say like, well, how far away is he? Because he sure looks like a heck of an athlete.
That's what I mean by that. Yeah. Not showing things, but like if he's not with the group, that's what I mean. Yeah. It's like they like him with that top. It's like, whoa, like why is this not happening? Vision Poet says Jordan Johnson is at Iowa Western City College. Listen, junior college got some players, Jamie. I'm telling you, you just don't. You show up in junior college and you got bounce backs from Notre Dame and UCF. Must become some kind of player to play in junior college. I tell you that, Jamie. Tell you that. All right. Next question from ND Paul. Belichick. Bill Belichick will likely do well in the portal, right? Has history shown that you can or cannot build a team through their portal? All the ESPN talking heads are already declaring that Belichick will be much more successful than Sanders. First of all, who cares what ESPN talking heads have to say about anything? Truly, they are truly a waste of time. God, these guys, please stop. I hate every show. Anyway, except ours. Hit the like, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell. Irish Sports Daily, we give you the goods. Why wouldn't one of our quarterbacks go play for Belichick if offered? Would you think the top players, including quarterback, would be attracted to it? The dude has got to be one of the top X's and O's coaches in the country. Well, not for quarterbacks. I mean, obviously, he had a very good quarterback in Tom Brady. But like that wasn't really a Bill Belichick thing. That was like a Charlie Weiss, Josh McDaniels thing. He's not like, if I was a quarterback, I'd want to know who we brought in to be his OC before I was like, yeah, I'm definitely going to go play for Bill Belichick. Now, if I was like, a defensive player, I'd think a little bit different about it because he's a brilliant defensive mind. You can absolutely build through the portal. The Mike Lombardi part of this would make me very nervous. He knows what he's doing about evaluating college football players, high school football players, like what to be portal guys. Like, you're not drafting them to your team. You're trying to build a football team. To me, it's a little bit different. I mean, Bill Belichick, Mac Brown can go 6-6, right? And Bill Belichick can go 9-3, 10-2, 11-1, just as well as anybody else can. Your thoughts, Jamie? Your thoughts?
I mean, history has not shown that you can build a team.
A team
for 1 year.
A team.
A 1 year team? Yes, you can. You can do it. Indiana, right now. Florida State. Can you build a program? Nah.
Michigan State.
No. Because I mean, you look at here's Louisville's a perfect example of like they got a lot of good players in the portal last year who end up being like really good players for them this year. But at some point, so now it's like they're going to lose Ashton Gelati or whatever, right? In thing. They're not replacing that guy in the portal. Do they got another guy coming up who's like him? Because if they don't, your defense ain't going to be near as good. So it's like there's a lot of that, that it takes, it takes time. Some of these guys you got to like build and develop and stuff. And, I think that they could get good right away through the portal, and that could happen. I mean, I have no idea. Who knows? Because I mean, what's Dion going to look like when Travis Hunter's not on his team? Like, and Shedeur, right? Like, I don't know. Like they still got talent coming back, but it's like, I don't know. I don't know what that's going to look like, right? So it's just there's a lot of stuff that you want to see it over time. I will say this, like Bill Belichick, yeah, he is like a brilliant X's and O's guy. He's going to. There's definitely going to be games where you're like, oh my god, he took that dude to school. Like with just it happens because he did it in the NFL. Even when he didn't have a great team, he would do that sometimes. Like he's that dude, right? So I think that's something that like I'm kind of like, man, I wish Notre Dame wasn't playing them and then whatever, because he might just come up with that one game that's just going to frustrate the heck out of you. But in terms of why wouldn't one of Notre Dame's like other transfer quarterbacks there, it's like, well, for the most part, these guys, no one wants a transfer quarterback that hasn't played.
Right.
They're trying to get guys that have like, oh, you started somewhere. It's like when we talked the question about Miller Moss. It's like, well, Miller Moss, he lost the starting job, whatever. He showed enough that you're like, man, get this guy in the right system. He's pretty good,
Right.
And you got one game of Steve Angeli as a starter in a bowl game where, half of Oregon State opted out. That's not as much film as you're going to get. And I mean, he's looked great in garbage time, but people don't care about that. Like they care about like, whatever. And it's not to say that Steve Angeli, if he transferred somewhere, that he couldn't be really good, but if anyone thinks that he's going to be like, he will be a plan B guy for somebody. So, I mean, I don't imagine that. I don't know what North Carolina's quarterback situation for next year, but I don't imagine that they're going to be like, hey, we need to get a guy who's going to be like, we're not sure about, and we're just going to get a guy who's going to come in. Like, no, they're going to try to get somebody who can play right away. And that's kind of, what it is. And and it's easy to say all these things about like, there are going to be some people who are really attracted to playing for a coach like Bill Belichick. That is definitely going to happen. Mm-hmm. But he's not exactly Mr. Personality in terms of like,
no,
like in terms of relating to like youth. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't know. It depends on the rest of the staff and how everybody else is there. And I mean, I wouldn't bet against them that it will be successful, but like, I mean, I definitely wouldn't bet on them either because it's a lot of unknown.
Yeah, I mean, it's like they could build, like you said, they could build a good team, but like, is he going to be around for like, I want to build a program at North Carolina? Like, I'm passionate about the North Carolina program, like being elite in college football. Like, I don't know. Like that's like I said, it's a thing.
Well, signed a 3-year deal, so it's pretty obviously he's not sticking around for long.
A 3-year deal? Jesus. I mean, they said they wanted to see the rumor is he wants his son to be the coach or whatever. And okay, but I don't know. That doesn't give me the warm and fuzzies. Funk Beavis asks, we as Notre Dame sickles all know how good Love is, but how big would it be for Notre Dame if he was a big playoffs with a couple of absurd runs that go viral? Of course, it would help Notre Dame win, but I'm asking from a reputation, recruiting standpoint, does Notre Dame not just winning, but having a guy look cool doing it matter? I don't know that it matters. If they're winning, they're winning. And that's like, this is one of those things where like the Notre Dame's reputation as a program is that they can't win the big games. If you're winning in the playoffs, then that reputation is going away. Like, I agree from that standpoint, like beating Indiana won't move the needle. Beating Georgia in New Orleans, by the way, would be a very big deal. That would be huge. Then possibly beating Penn State would be huge, right? Like, if your reputation is you can't win the big one and then you start winning the big one, not just that, but Notre Dame's not doing anything if Jeremiah Love isn't a star. So kind of like everything gets elevated in this situation. To me, it's very good that they have a premier run. They're going to have a premier running back next year. Like, he could be in the Heisman conversation. Jeremiah Love could, if things kind of trend the way they've been trending. That's a big deal. It's a very big deal. Not just running back, but skill position, period. Having a guy like that. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. Where do you go?
I mean, I think it helps, but it's not. I don't think it's like one of those things. It helps more if he's a first round pick. Next year. Like that's what will help the most, and that's the kind of thing that ultimately people want to see. Obviously they want to play with great players, but it's one of those things where it's it matters more that if he's flashy and he's a first round pick, hey, there you go.
Yes, sir. All right, let's go to the next question. Irish KG07. At the end of the season, Notre Dame's line was playing noticeably better. Could you explain why they looked more dominant and clean against Army and USC? And if you predict them to continue this climb having extra practice? Their performance feels like a crucial piece of the playoff puzzle, especially if they face Georgia. So do you attribute it to anything other than experience, getting more reps together, getting things figured out, reinserting Billy Strouth, Rocco Spindler playing really good football, right? Rocco Spindler, let me put it like this. Pat Coogan and Rocco Spindler, markedly improved from last year, would you say? Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. Well, where do you attribute that to anything other than just getting reps?
Well, one, I think Coogan is better off at center than guard. I don't think he's a guard. So I think that helps him a lot. And then I think one of the things too is that Rocco is just he's just better, and it's just like it makes sense that he'd be better. Like most guys are going to be better than they were. Not to say that he was deserving of like starting before, but it's like they would have given him the job if he earned it during the thing. But he's earned the chance to stay on the field and still be the starter by the way he's played, right? So I think that's kind of just what it is. And sometimes it's just confidence, right? Sometimes it's confidence and whatever. And like, I think too, it helps when your running back's like breaking off a big run and all of a sudden it's like, maybe you didn't do the best job, but it helps you do your job better the next time. Because it's like, you want to make that block. And, I think there's all the things you mentioned. It's all of those things. And then it's also the fact that Virginia game, especially because of the penalties, wasn't the cleanest game for them. So it was like, I bet they got after him pretty hard in practice that week. And then it was like, okay, then we did it. And then you have that Army game and they got really challenged to be like physical, whatever. And they were so great at that. And then they had it. So I think people don't talk about confidence enough. It's so huge. It's so huge. And that does carry over from week to week. So, that's something I think they're going to, I can't really think that there's going to be too many units on the team that it's going to be as confident as the offensive line going into this game.
Cardon Racket, whatever. Greg and Jamie, what changes do you see coming next year at O-line? I don't want to get too much into it because there's so many moving parts. What I will say is it's a very fascinating question. Like Coogan and Rocco, Coogan specifically, but relating to Craig, like I don't know where he's going to be at in rehab. Like, what can he do in the spring? Is Rocco just gonna I assume he's just going to be the starting center in the spring, for Coogan. Rocco, are you going to just like bring in someone who is like, yeah, like we have a better right guard than him? Now he's started a ton of games now, right? And he's getting better. On paper, they have better options there, but in practice, I don't know. So what do you do with Jagusaw? What do you want him to be a tackle still? What do you want Anthony Knapp? Do you want him to be a tackle still? I don't think anyone's getting Emil Wagner out of the lineup, so that's not happening. Strouth is not leaving the lineup, so it's just I don't want to get too into it. It's too hypothetical right now.
I'm not going to get into it at all because it's impossible to know. And I don't no disrespect to Carden. Thank you for asking the question because it gets asked all the time, but it's impossible for anyone to know.
But what I will say, it is a fascinating question.
It's fascinating.
I wanted to.
Everyone cares about it. All you got to know is Notre Dame's going to have great options.
They are going to have a very good offensive line next year. They're going to be really, really good on the offensive line. NDIOTT. Close games often come down to last-second field goals. Indiana's kicker is 9 of 10 on field goals this year with a long of 41. He is perfect on extra points. Notre Dame is struggling on the field goal department lately. Can you share your opinions on how you think Notre Dame will improve in this area heading into Friday? How confident are you in Notre Dame special teams as a whole heading into Friday night? As a whole, I feel good. If it's going to be windy and snowy, I don't like the situation for kicking. I'm going to be honest. I don't like that. Makes me nervous. Windy and snowing for a guy with a groin problem. I don't like that. So that's how I feel about field goal kicking for Notre Dame. Your thoughts?
I think, one that Indiana's kicker is, this is his first year as their kicker, right? Mm-hmm. He's in his second year in the program, but it's his first year as a kicker. And long of 41, 9 of 10. Hey, 9 of 10, great. He should be confident, feel good. But he'll never have to kick a bigger kick than any kick he kicks in this game. And similar to Mitch Sheeter, where he has had to make a lot of clutch kicks in his career, but considering of what is the circumstances of how things have gone for him, there's never going to be more pressure on him than in this game. So, anything can happen with the field goal kicking. I wouldn't feel confident in any sort of way for either team. But, it might come down to any one of these games now could be close. And this could end up being a very close game in the end.
Yeah.
And they need a field goal to win it. And we'll just have to wait and see because there is no other options that they feel good about or else they would have gone to. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. There's one last question that got submitted late that I didn't get a chance to do the graphic, but I will read it from T-Borg 3. Besides the running game, the most important thing for Notre Dame to go on a run in the playoffs is, 1, to create mismatches with the tight end to help with the explosive passing game. 2, get a receiver to continually step up. 3, Riley Leonard continuing to step up in the running game. 4, something else. I'm going to say above of those options, I'm going to say get a receiver to continually step up. It is the biggest question mark on the offense right now. That is the answer. If you have a receiver, doesn't have to be a person, just one receiver being kind of like a big time option in the games. I think that is the biggest thing for Notre Dame to go on a run. I think that's what they need.
Yeah, I agree with that too. And I think if you look at where previous installments of the playoff, which obviously were different because of the 14, but still, where you saw a Justin Ross, an OJ Howard, who's a tight end, but still, like, God, who's the Clemson? Hunter Renfro, right? You saw guys that like didn't do that stuff all year that came.
Lad McConkey,
whatever. Ton of those guys just come through in big moments. Like Adonai Mitchell, true freshman, catches 2 touchdowns. Like all that kind of things, I think really, matter. Like they can matter and make a difference, and they made a difference with those teams. Devontae Smith coming in and catching the guy had 6 catches the whole year, catches the game-winning touchdown overtime in the college football playoff, right? So it just takes one game or maybe even one play for that thing, and they really could use it at receiver.
Yeah. Jay Lamont, thank you for the super chat. Keep doing your thing, Greg. I'll support. This is kind of about conversation about Mike Brown in the chat. What I will say is regarding Mike Brown is I think we're monitoring. We're monitoring. I'm not going to make an opinion. I'm not going to make a conclusion one way or the other. It's 1 year, whatever. I don't think the receivers have greatly improved throughout the year. We'll get into it after. Like if the receivers have like a really good playoffs, then there's nothing to talk about, right? Then he did a good job. If they don't, and they kind of continue on the trend, then we got to see development. We got to see Micah Gilbert develop. We got to see Cam Williams develop. We got to see Logan Saldate develop. Jordan Faison, like all the guys, all the young guys on the roster, like everyone who stays, that receiver room's got to get better. He hasn't been around that long, so I don't want to cast aspersions or anything like that. It's just, we're monitoring. That's it, and that's fair. I think that's a fair way to do it. Jamie, those are the questions. Right under 2 hours.
Yeah, that was just way too long. That was too many questions, man. We gotta, and these ones. No offense to all the people in the chat, but we gotta eliminate the chat questions or something because we had too many questions to go through. 2 hours is too long.
We want to honor the people who are hanging in there for 2 hours.
We give the Coles Notes answers to the people in the thing. That's my opinion. We got it. They're too long. This was 2 hours. 2 hours. Guys, no one wants to listen to a podcast episode 2 hours. But if you listen to this, hey, thank you so much for listening to it for 2 hours.
Hit the like, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, so whatever it is. We are going live. We'll be back next week. Power Hour will be Monday with Mike doing that. So we'll talk to Mike on Monday. Jamie will be on with that. I will be on production for that. Hit and Hustle Tuesday. We got some. Now we got to get the real, like, okay, we got to get into the real, preview stuff. Dig deep on these things. So have a good weekend, everyone. Hit the like, hit subscribe. Podcast links in the description below. We'll talk to you next week. Have a good weekend. Keep hitting and hustling.